ਵਾਹਿਗੁਰੂ ਸਾਹਿਬ ਜੀ। ਇੱਕ ਓੰਕਾਰ ਸਤਨਾਮ ਕਰਤਾ ਪੁਰਖ ਨਿਰਭਉ ਨਿਰਵੈਰ ਅਕਾਲ ਮੂਰਤ ਅਜੂਨੀ ਸੈਭੰ ਗੁਰ ਪ੍ਰਸਾਦ ਜਪ। ਆਦਿ ਸੱਚ ਜੁਗਾਦ ਸੱਚ ਹੈ ਭੀ ਸੱਚ ਨਾਨਕ ਹੋਸੀ ਭੀ ਸੱਚ। ਕਹਾਂ ਬੁੱਧ ਪ੍ਰਭ ਤੁਛ ਹਮਾਰੀ ਬਰਨ ਸਕੈ ਮਹਿਮਾ ਜੋ ਤਿਹਾਰੀ। ਹਮ ਨਾ ਸਗਤ ਕਰ ਸਿਫਤ ਤੁਮਾਰੀ ਆਪ ਲਿਹੋ ਤੁਮ ਕਥਾ ਸੁਧਾਰੀ। ਹਮ ਨਾ ਸਗਤ ਕਰ ਸਿਫਤ ਤੁਮਾਰੀ ਆਪ ਲਿਹੋ ਤੁਮ ਕਥਾ ਸੁਧਾਰੀ।
ਸਤਨਾਮ ਸ੍ਰੀ ਵਾਹਿਗੁਰੂ ਸਾਹਿਬ ਜੀ। ਦੋਹਰਾ ਜਾਪ ਪਾਤ ਸਾਹੈ ਇਮ ਕਹਿਓ ਇਨ ਦਇਓ ਰਾਜ ਕਿਨ ਨਾਹੇ। ਰਈਅਤ ਆਕੀ ਹਮ ਪਈ ਹੈ ਨਾਰਦ ਅਹਿਮਦ ਸਾਹੇ। ਜਪ ਪਾਤ ਸਾਹੈ ਇਮ ਕਹਿਓ।
ਵਾਹਿਗੁਰੂ ਜੀ ਕਾ ਖਾਲਸਾ ਵਾਹਿਗੁਰੂ ਜੀ ਕੀ ਫਤਿਹ। Guru Roop, Guru Pyari Saad Sangat Ji, we are blessed to be in the presence of Dhan Dhan Sahib Sri Guru Granth Sahib Ji Maharaj. And Maharaj has blessed us with the continuation of the Katha of their Panth, and so we begin the second chapter and episode from Panth Parkash. Bhai Rattan Singh Ji reflects on what they had discussed in the first chapter, that when the British arrived and took Delhi, that as Sir David Oxolone was celebrating the British rule over Delhi, that the Nahang Singhs, the Khalsa Panth, raided Delhi and looted it, robbing them of the glory from their procession. At that time, Sir Oxolone went to the Mughal Emperor Shah Alam and asked Shah Alam about the history of the Sikhs, and Bhai Rattan Singh in this chapter reflects on that history and then moves the time some year forward into how they themselves came into the role and responsibility for writing this seva. But essentially, Bhai Rattan Singh begins by telling us that Shah Alam, the Emperor of Mughal, who did no favours to the Sikhs, gave a false history of the Sikhs, that the Sikhs' power came only because of the power vacuum that had been built by Ahmad Shah Abdali and Nader Shah's invasions. And it is so important that we connect with this history, because when we look at contemporary histories of the period, some of these famous battles are described as the Jat battles, as battles that had nothing to do with religion or were based on the same caste politics that we perceive in today's society. But Bhai Rattan Singh Ji tells us of a higher order of people called the Khalsa Panth, created by Guru Nanak Dev Ji, blessed with their form by Guru Gobind Singh Ji, as the Fauj of Akal Purkh, as the army of the Almighty. And Bhai Rattan Singh Ji now gives the history from their perspective, telling us that the Mughal Emperor did no favours to the Sikhs, saying that they had no right to power and rule over Punjab. Anji.
ਦੋਹਰਾ ਜਾਪ ਪਾਤ ਸਾਹੈ ਹਿਮ ਕਹਿਓ ਇਨ ਦਇਓ ਰਾਜ ਕਿਨ ਨਾਹੇ।
And when Shah Alam told the English that no one has given these things Raj,
ਰਈਅਤ ਆਕੀ ਹਮ ਪਈ ਐ ਨਾਰਦ ਅਹਿਮਦ ਸਾਹੇ।
they are mere peasants who came to rule over Punjab because of the power vacuum created by Abdali and Nader Shah's invasions.
ਚੌਪਈ ਤਬ ਅੰਗਰੇਜ਼ ਤਿਉ ਹੀ ਲਿਖ ਲਿਓ।
And the Englishman Oxolone and his officials wrote down the history as Shah Alam gave it to them.
ਸਿੰਘਨ ਰਾਜ ਨ ਕਿਨਹੂ ਦਇਓ।
That they were satisfied that these men who had ruled their procession, these men who were ruling over Punjab, that they had no legal authority to rule, and based on this Oxolone was satisfied with the response that he received from the Mughal Emperor.
ਨਹੀਂ ਪਰਵਾਨੋ ਸਿੰਘਾ ਪਾਹੇ।
That there are no official arrangements, rules or laws or regulation that allow them to govern.
ਨਹੀਂ ਬਖਸ਼ ਕਿਨ ਕਰੀ ਪਤ ਸਾਹੇ।
And neither has no emperor granted upon them their royalties and their nobilities such that they should be allowed to rule.
ਦਲੀਸ਼ ਕਹਿਓ ਤਿਮ ਲਿਖਿਓ ਕਿਤਾਬ।
As the Emperor of Delhi narrated the history, so Oxolone wrote down that history.
ਹੁਕਮ ਪਾਇਓ ਧਰੀ ਸਿਤਾਬ।
And Oxolone considered it case closed. He was put to task to investigate the Singhs, to investigate the Khalsa Panth. And this, when we look into the history and the records of the East India Company in Punjab, This is where we find the interaction of British military officers, political agents with the Khalsa Panth, officially starting when the Singhs raided the procession in Punjab and later went on to interrupt the British parades and cause havoc in Ludhiana through Akali Phula Singh. So Akali Phula Singh, who was the general of the Khalsa Panth, Maharaja Ranjit Singh, who was the emperor of the Sikh Empire. Now the history moves forward 3 or 4 years, and Bhai Rattan Singh Ji will tell us of this time in Punjab too. That no one blessed these things with Raj was what the Mughal emperor had told them, missing out the stories and the Sakhiyan of all these famous Sikhs. And Oxaloni thought in his head, okay, these things, this Khalsa Panth has come to rule Punjab from a mere peasant rebellion. Such rebellions from peasants never last, and powerful forces will always take over them. And at that point, Oxaloni, who was essentially in charge from a military perspective of the Delhi operations of the East India Company, at this point we realize that in his mind arose the firm desire to take rule of Punjab for the English. And as Oxaloni wrote down this history of the Panth, considering his legal inquiries closed, Shah Alam was greatly pleased that he had been able to continue this enmity with the Sikhs and seek to cause them havoc, now essentially pitching them in war against Oxaloni and the forces of the East India Company. And Bhai Rattan Singh says, why would the emperor of the Mughal emperor of Delhi hesitate to say bad things about Singhs such that it would place them in the way of harm and havoc? Of course he would be pleased at doing such a task. Because in India has been immersed in a political conflict between the Hindus and the Muslims, and this has been going on for more than 1,000 years. When once India was ruled by the Buddhists, and then it was ruled by the Hindus, and then it was ruled by the Muslims. And Bhai Rattan Singh Ji says that the continent has been engulfed in such a war for centuries, but that why would the people of the time not harbour such prejudices for one another? And some years passed then from this time. The Maharaja Ranjit Singh had taken the Sikh Empire. Now Khalsa Ji, as we said, that the entire Khalsa Panth came out of what was the original Panth Khalsa at the time. So from the Khalsa Panth you had the Tat Khalsa, from there you had the divisions into Buddha Dal and Tanna Dal. The Tanna Dal then became 12 missals, from them 12 missals we then see an extension of growth of them, numbering 64, where each missile had then come to rule its own part of Punjab. And one of those powerful missildars was Maharaja Ranjit Singh Ji, who had inherited his empire from his dad Bhai Maha Singh Ji. Bhai Maha Singh Ji, who was the son of Bhai Rattan Singh Ji, who was one of the most famous Khalsa warriors in the Tat Khalsa, in the Buddha Dal, in the Khalsa Panth. So Bhai Rattan Singh Ji, is said during the large holocaust of the Sikhs, led 5 horses to exhaustion, defending the Sikh women and children in that battle. And it was pleased at his Shahidi that Guru Gobind Singh Ji blessed him that his family would become great emperors, and it is from that dynasty that Maharaja Ranjit Singh came. So a time came then when all the other kingdoms of the Sikhs, the Maharaja of Patiala, the Fulkian states, their descendants, they were all blessed with their Raj by Guru Hargobind Sahib Ji. And there was a time when their ancestors, the Patiala Delhi Maharajas and everyone of the like, would have to come into the Panth and take Amrit. And what you had over a period of time was the Sikhs started to turn on one another. And it is important that we are critical in our reflection on history and able to take the lessons that it brings us. Essentially, up until that point when the Singhs started to turn on one another at such a scale where they wanted to take each other's territories from each other, up until that point they were untouchable by outside forces. But as soon as these animosities within themselves developed, then an opportunity arose for the East India Company to take advantage of. The rulers of the Fulkian states went to the British, and they thought that, so the common saying in Punjab essentially goes along the lines of, they thought Ranjit Singh is someone who will kill us quickly and the East India Company will kill us slowly. And like the rulers in Kaljug that Bhai Rattan Singh Ji tells us about in this chapter, that distinguish those who follow the path of Dharam, The rulers in this day and age concern only for themselves, concern only for their greed, and so sell themselves often to the highest bidder. And so it was that half of the Sikh states then became under the rule of the British, because they thought that the British would protect them from their own king, Maharaja Ranjit Singh. So the empire of Maharaja Ranjit Singh Ji was a true reflection of a glorious secular empire, where freedom and justice was prevalent, where the rule of Guru Nanak Dev Ji's teachings were accessible and everyone could practice these. Equally, you had a powerful Khalsa army at the Akal Takht, and it was on the backbone of this army of Akali Phula Singh Ji and the many battles that he, along with great warriors like Hari Singh Nalwa, led, that the Khalsa Panth was able to establish its Raj from Amritsar, essentially extending out across Afghanistan, Kashmir, parts of China, the Himalayas, Tibet, essentially Punjab up until the point of Delhi, and of course the famous capital of Lahore, were all ruled by the Khalsa Panth. But yet a cancer within them had emerged, where on one half of the state now, you now have them under the protection and administration of the British.
Ludhiana Suvan Bahai.
And they set about their capital in Ludhiana. So as the East India Company set up its capital in Ludhiana, having made a settlement with the rulers of the Malwa states, when Akali Phula Singh Ji passed through Ludhiana, he set on fire every British encampment from Ludhiana to Anandpur Sahib, essentially burning and often killing where such instances arose, the British to root them out of Punjab, recognising that it would be the downfall of the Sikh rule. And Maharaja Ranjit Singh, who was a great diplomat, resorted to his Isht, his spiritual guide, Maharaj Sahib Singh Bedi Ji, and said to them that you resolve this matter for us, and you're a great saint, and it is you alone as a saint that Akali Phula Singh's temper may be killed by. And Baba Sahib Singh Ji, who was a very wise spiritual man, essentially gave that message that the Guru has ordained in their prophecies that this time would arise when these white people will come to take our earth. So some of these bhajan are mentioned in the Sausaki, and like Panth Parkash, which was recorded and noted in the private libraries of many ruling families around the world. So I've been able to locate during my research one of these Sausakis that was translated personally by Sir Atra Singh for the Queen, where these prophecies around the white people, these prophecies around Dalip Singh were all essentially spoken of, as in through this that Akali Phula Singh recognised that a time has come that our empires will fall, but we intend to resist them until possible. And in this way we see Akali Phula Singh essentially becoming like the Robin Hood figure of the Khalsa Panth against the British rule. Anji. So this is around 1864 in the Samvat age, and the Desi calendar that we use as Sikhs, because this is the calendar that our Guru used, and because our Guru used it, we continue to use it. And this translates roughly to around 1807 AD, and we know from many official writings and records that this was a time when the treaty between Maharaja Ranjit Singh and the East India Company was written, so that one's forces would stay away from the territories that were under the protection of the British. But Akali Phula Singh Ji, who was respected at that time by all the rulers as the head of the Panth, was able to roam freely with his armies, and the British had put a warrant out for his arrest. And it said that the Sikh soldiers put down their weapons when they learned who it was that they were going to arrest. So such a time we see in the Punjab, a critical time when the British power hold starts to grow. And the British were an effective fighting force. They were organised. They had been in Hindustan for essentially maybe 50, 60 years by this point. They had established trade links back home. They had key ports. They were able to recruit from the Marathas, the Bengalis, the Mughals. Everywhere they ruled, they were able to satisfy the greed of those such that they would serve their own cause. And through this divide and conquer policy, they had become very powerful at being able to set the different tribes in India, as the Bengalis, the Marathas, the Sikhs, the whoever, Nepalis and Gurkhas and Tamils that came. They set about a policy whereby these people set themselves against each other and could be bought by the British. So they at that time had commanded a very effective force, such that Ranjit Singh saw it better to negotiate a peace with them.
Surtha linin tharaye satadra vapar na ham lakhan.
And Bhai Rattan Singh Ji now tells us of the treaties written and around the 1807, 1808, 1806. We start to see negotiations take place which result in formal treaties between Madhur and Ranjit Singh and the British representatives as the East India Company. The agreement between these countries and these territories, essentially placing the Fulkeen states under the protection of the British, which were laws to be respected by Ranjit Singh, were drafted, which these laws, notably Akali Phula Singh as the head of the Khalsa Panth, chose to ignore. And at this point now, where Dr. Loni is in Punjab, he thinks back to that time where he was having his conversations with Shah Alam about these people. And Dr. Loni now, who has seen many things happening, he has seen this procession at Delhi that he was involved in, that the Singhs came and ruined. He has seen Akali Phula Singh burn down his camps. He has seen Akali Phula Singh's men fire upon members of their forces during celebrations in Amritsar. And he thinks that, you know, Shah Alam described these people as mere peasants who had no power of their own. And I'm seeing a different side to these people. And he started to inquire again as to their origins. And when he was stationed at Ludhiana, living amongst these people, he started to ponder in his mind that those writings which Shah Alam had given to me. He decided to delegate to one of his captains, Captain David Murray, and called on Captain Murray. Captain Murray was a man who was well travelled, he was well seasoned, he understood the world, and he understood the Sikhs and the Punjabis because he had lived amongst them for a while. So Octoloni essentially considered him to have the right qualifications for this task. So the general called for his captain. And he sat down with him and he explained to him in delicate detail the task that he wanted him to complete. He said, tell me the history of those Singhs. Tell me how the Khalsa came to rule. Find out if what the Emperor at Delhi told us is true. Maybe that Mughal did tell us lies. These Hindus and these Muslims who live and fight amongst each other, who knows how much enmity they bear for each other. Now remember here, it is important to distinguish. Bhai Rattan Singh is not calling us as Hindus. He is telling us the British man how they perceive it in a very simplified way of the people of India and the Musliman. Because in Bani we know from Guru Gobind Singh Ji's writing, Karo Khalsa Panthi Sar Pravesa Jagah Singh Jode Tara Neel Pesa. One of the key things about being a Khalsa is you rise out of that secular difference where people perceive themselves as Musliman or Hindu and say, no, we're something beyond this. Because what is there? And what was there at the time? There was just inner fighting, and so for Guru Gobind Singh Ji to say, Imam Safi Manas ki ja sab hai ek hai pehchan bo, that Guru Gobind Singh Ji in their Pavan Bani and Akal Usat was to say that in both the Hindu and in both the Musliman there is God, and we follow the path that sees that. That is the highest way. That is the Panth that Guru Nanak Dev Ji, that is the Panth that Bhagat Kabir Ji, that is the Panth that Akali Phula Singh Ji and all of us belong to. So we must be mindful of the sectarianism that we see in today's society and how and where the sectarianism was created, and also recognize that words had different meanings hundreds of years ago, especially before they were politicized and used as ways of hatred against each other. And these Englishmen are thinking, like, when do these Muslims ever tell the truth? They just told us that these people were Jats. They just told us, yeah, these people are reckless, they have no religion, they're just peasants, and they revolted against their rulers, because that is essentially how outsiders of the time saw the Sikhs. They did not recognize them from within themselves, and it is this powerful narrative that Bhai Rattan Singh Ji gives us from the perspective as a peasant, where they speak of the Jat, the Trakhan, the Nai, the Shimba, essentially the common people who went on to become Khalsa. And the British are thinking, when do emperors ever lose to peasants? It is unheard of. The Mughal Empire, which is one of the most famed empires, that in the most important part of their territories, some peasants just stood up and took that land from them. It doesn't make sense. The Mughals were in charge of 22 subas. They had a huge amount of territory. Their kingdom was huge. And they'd established ports, they had ships, they had islands. That it was no small empire that the Mughals represented. All of Hind, all of India. So we see here the word Hind, it means continent, it means country. And by the distinction then between the Hind and the Turk is essentially the foreigner and the native. So from a social perspective, this is how the language was used. Of course, in this day and age, we know how these things are politicized and essentially weaponized. But of that time, and the prejudices, Bhai Rattan Singh reflects them very openly. And it is for us, I think, to understand and reflect on them and recognize them from within us and make sure that we are elevating ourselves from a place of hatred or elevating ourselves from these narratives that are essentially foreignly imposed. And the British are thinking some miracle must have happened. There is no other way of explaining how such a mighty empire would fall to these peasants. The peasants, they are like the sheep and the emperor is like the lion. How are the sheep going to take rule from the lion? The emperor is the hunter and the peasants are the hunted. How can it be that the hunted turn on the hunter? No, this is impossible. The description given to us is it cannot be accepted, because never do the chiriyan se main baaj ladaun tabha Gobind Singh naam kaha. One of the famous sayings of Guru Gobind Singh is that I will turn these sparrows into being able to fight with these hawks, and it is that spirit that Guru Gobind Singh Ji gave the Khalsa. And the British think that there must be some miracle behind this to explain how it is that the lion, the ruler, now becomes hunted by his peasant citizens. That this is surely some karamat, this is surely some miracle that we must investigate how and what happened here. Is there truly some miraculous power in these people? Do they belong to some great martial Panth? Because the British extensively studied the different Panths, the different paths in India of the time, the sannyasis, the Bairagis, the Naga sadhus. Each of these the British understood very intricately, and they also understood the importance of religious institutions in India at the time. And so you find that they weaved themselves not just within the social and political fabric of society at that time, but equally within the religious institutions, whereby, like you would have in many countries where foreigners come in, you have the monasteries, you have the religious authorities essentially upholding the rule of the tyrants. And the British had understood these people, but they had not yet understood the Khalsa Panth. And now Octolone tasks Captain Murray that you must extensively research this and present to us the details of what has happened here, because it must be some great miracle. And Octolone says to Murray, remember what the Mughal Emperor at Delhi told us? So, I beg your pardon, Captain Murray now is telling Octolone, look, it's like he's been told to do something and he's trying to say, I don't want to do it. He's saying, look, if you have to send an account back to London, let's use the account that the Emperor from Delhi has given us. Surely that's good enough because it's come from the king. So Shah Alam, essentially, he was not a ruler, he was a puppet by that time that sometimes the Marathas would uphold, sometimes the British would uphold. And when the Singhs had their day, they would uphold and say, we don't want Delhi, let the Mughals rule it, you better just pay taxes when we come on time. And so he had no true authority or power other than being someone who, because he came from the Mughals, people could say, yeah, he's the true ruler of Delhi, use his legitimacy and essentially be the power bases themselves, whether it was the Marathas, the Afghans, the Sikhs, the British. And so Shah Alam's account is what Captain Murray says, is why don't we send that back to London? But he says Ochterlony was a very intelligent man. He didn't listen to Captain Murray. He said, I'm the general, you're the captain, this is what you're doing. He said, if that emperor from Delhi has written lies, it's going to be me who looks false if that record goes to London. And also, it makes sense that we should learn from other sources. We shouldn't reflect on just one person's account. And Bhai Rattan Singh Ji here praises, because as we said, there's many political and military strategies that Bhai Rattan Singh calls out, and one of them is here saying, look, what an intelligent man. He decided, I better not take one person's word for it. Let me get someone else's for word. And that's something we can always remember in life. He said to Captain Murray, he's all the things I want to know. How did these things become Padshah? How did these commoners become emperors? This is what the general wanted to understand. That if what has been written and collected is truthful, then everyone in Punjab will say to us, yeah, it's what Shah Alam said. These things are nothing and nobody. Abdali and Nadir Shah came and raided the place, and these were just the peasants who ruled it. Fine, if Shah Alam's right, then everyone will tell us that he's right. But if the Emperor of Delhi was telling us lies, then it is for us to distinguish now what is truthful and what is false. Maybe we might find upon our research one of their old writings, because what they were very good at was finding important writings and essentially recognizing how much people could get caught in the debate of scripture. So many scriptural debates were put into the Sikh religion as for various means through these times. And at this time they were pondering in the early 1800s, can we get hold of one of their own writings that might tell us of their history? That maybe if we find one of their own writings, we will read that and be satisfied with what it says. And then we'll just send that old writing, we'll send that to the King of England. But Ochterlony says, and whatever we send, there better not even be a little bit of falsehood within it. I want to know in detail how these things came to be rulers. That I want to do this, and we better be good about it, because this is going to get sent all around the world. And Captain Murray took his orders from his captain and Murray took his orders from the general and set about then on this task with great effort. He called Bhutta Shah Maulvi, who was a prominent Punjabi writer of the time, and said to him, write me the history of the Sikhs. Tell me the origins of these people, and only tell me that which is truthful. Don't tell me any lies. This is going to go to the King of London and is going to get sent all around the world. So in this way, Captain Murray narrated to Bhutta Shah Maulvi what he wanted him to write. Tell me of these people and how their Panth came to grow. In that same court, so Bhai Rattan Singh Ji, remember, who was the grandson of Bhai Mehtab Singh Shaheed, who assassinated Masarangar, who had killed many Sikhs and taken over Harmandir Sahib as his own abode. So when Bhai Mehtab Singh Ji was Shaheed, Jahdar Baba Sham Singh Ji, who was one of the founding members of the Buddha Dal, who Karoda Singh was his Guruvai, his assistant, from who the Karoda Singh missile came, and then Baba Baghel Singh headed that missile, which ruled Delhi. So Baba Shyam Singh is one of the Siane Singhs at that time, married his daughter to Rai Singh, who was the son of Bhai Mehtab Singh when Bhai Mehtab Singh became Shaheed. And then what Baba Shyam Singh Ji did was he donated much of his land, much of his rule that he'd acquired to his daughter so as to provide for the family of Shaheed Bhai Mehtab Singh Ji. So Bhai Rattan Singh Ji was an aristocrat, he was a landlord, he had many titles and deeds in both the Malwa region and in the Amritsar region on his name, because his granddad knew that if ever Punjab is to be attacked, people will come from his family in Amritsar. So he was sure to give his daughter, I think it was around 10 villages close to Ludhiana as well. So when Rattan Singh came to the court then in Ludhiana, because he had some affairs to resolve, it is here that he started to interact with the British for himself. And he became alarmed when he heard that, oh, this is going to get sent all around the world to all the kings and empires. And remember, we have found some of the writings for the time, and it may be that these volumes in Panth Parkash we still need to find and will find in time. But essentially, when Bhai Rattan Singh Ji learns that the history of my people is to go all around the world and it's going to be written by Bhutta Shah Maulvi, he became alarmed. The Maulvi is a Muslim, he's not even from our religion, how can he write our history? That when will they ever praise a Sikh? Because as we spoke in the previous Katha, that Qazi Muhammad Nur Shah, who was one of the spiritual guides of the Muslims who accompanied their armies on their invasions to Hindustan, he praises the Sikhs, but he calls them dogs. But when he sees their actions, he can't help but praise them at the same time. So someone who bears enmity will always bring out that bias in what they speak about people, and there was a lot of enmity amongst the people at that time. And so Rattan Singh Bhangu says, I sat down Captain Murray and I thought I better explain this to him. He said, Captain Murray, whatever he writes, make sure you show me. And I'll look at that, and if there's anything I think is worth mentioning, I'll let you know. Because when Rattan Singh says that I got to see that, I said to Captain Murray, Bhutta Shah has not written the truth. And then Captain Murray and Bhai Rattan Singh became friends for a period of time. So this around again the early 1800s, and through that friendship Captain Murray then called upon Bhai Rattan Singh. Bhai Rattan Singh Ji, you are from this Khalsa Panth. You are the grandson of Bhai Mehtab Singh. You are the grandson of Shyam Singh. You are the son of the great Jinda Shaheed Bhai Rai Singh Ji. Your family are Misaldars. Your family were part of the Tat Khalsa. They ruled Punjab. You are amongst them and live still in that lifestyle that they gave you. You are clearly one of the original ones. Then why don't you write the history of your own people? And I said, listen, Captain Murray, you've placed your faith in the Muslim. Let me tell you the first thing about this place. The Hindus and the Muslims, they hate each other. They never would one speak good things about the other. The Hindus will speak bad of the Muslims, and the Turks will speak bad of the Muslims. In this way, just the natives and the foreigners, whichever enmity or labels they harbored then or today, they just say bad things about one another. And then Captain Murray said, Rattan Singh, we are not stupid. We are very smart people ourselves. We spend a lot of time reflecting on what is true and what is false. And the same way these swans that you speak of in Gurmukhi, the image of the swan being the one who is able to take the pearls from the ocean, essentially take the essence in a spiritual way. In the same way, Captain Murray says that we are able to take the essence and distinguish the truth from the falsehood. That even if what you write, we will find out if that is the truth as well. Because we will not write what is false. So essentially Rattan Singh paints a picture of Captain Murray as being a good man, a man of principles, a man he was able to make friends with. And a man that, in essentially his relationship with him, he entrusted that Rattan Singh will tell me the truth about his people.
ਅੰਗਰੇਜ਼ ਲੋਕ ਜੇ ਪਰ ਭੂਮ ਜਾਵਤ
And he said, listen, as Englishmen, we've been all around the world, we're educated, we're smart people, like, you know, we'll find out if it's true or not.
ਤਿਸੈ ਹਵਾਲ ਸਭੀ ਲਿਖ ਲਿਆਵਤ
And he said, we're going to write this and send it all around the world. It's very important for us that it's true, because otherwise it's our careers and reputations that will be at stake.
ਜੋ ਹੋਤ ਹੈ ਸਾਚ ਸਭ ਪਾਸ
That we only want to accumulate the truth so that we can report truthfully on what we find.
ਸੋ ਪੁਜਾਇਤ ਪਤ ਲੰਦਨ ਪਾਸ
And we're going to send it to London and to the king. And remember, we found some of the writings that Sikhs had made of early manuscripts to Queen Victoria around the 1860s and 70s. I think these original Panth Parkash writings and reports from the early 1800s are still to be discovered, and no doubt as Sikh research into such things in the United Kingdom continues, we will uncover many rich aspects of our history.
दोहरा कौमाली न हम कहियो इतनी बात बताहो.
And then Captain Murray said, all right, Rattan Singh, tell me one thing then.
सिंगन पायो राज किम औदीनो किन पत साहो.
Who gave them Raj and who gave them the right to rule? Because this is the Englishmen, of course, are immersed in their ways where they're like, okay, these people are ruling, so there must be a covenant, there must be a constitution, there must be a legal arrangement with some person, because there's no way Punjab is like the crown jewel. There's no way that they could have just created this. Did they make some arrangement with Nadir Shah? Because remember, when Nadir Shah, who was exhausted from his battles with the Sikhs, decided it better that he just send them gifts and offerings so as to appease them so that they wouldn't be at war for him. They turned them back saying, we're not interested in what you have to offer. Take back your fine almond and nuts to Afghanistan. We live off the chickpeas that we feed our horses. And in this way, the Captain Murray is saying, which of these emperors was it that the Singhs made an arrangement with? And Rattan Singh said, okay. So Rattan Singh at this point starts to open up to Captain Murray and openly talking to Captain Murray now about his religion and his beliefs.
Singhan Patshahi Sahe Sache Dai.
Our Patshahi was given to us by the Sache Patshah. The true sovereign gave us our sovereignty.
Mari kahyo Shah Sacho Koe.
Mari goes, the true sovereign. Who is the true sovereign?
Asa kahyo Shah Nanak Joe.
Mari said that the true sovereign was Guru Nanak Dev Ji, Shah Nanak.
Mari kahyo Payo Nanak Fakir.
Mari says, no, Nanak was a fakir. Nanak wasn't a Shah. Nanak was a saint. We've heard about this Guru Nanak Dev Ji, but he was a saint, not a king. How could the saint have given you sovereignty? Guru Nanak didn't know anything about emperors and history. Now, Captain Murray, of course, thinking Rattan Singh is a simple man, thinking I know about that history from the 1400s and Guru Nanak Dev Ji, because he's heard it from his accounts, that he's heard that, yeah, Guru Nanak Dev Ji in this path of Sikhi is part of one of these sects. It is part of the sannyasis, Bairagis and the Sikhs. They've understood it in their colonial mindset. They've not understood it in the ways that Bani is given to us. And he's thinking, Bhai Rattan Singh doesn't know. Let me tell him, no, Nanak wasn't a ruler, he was a saint. And Bhai Rattan Singh is saying Nanak was the ruler of the rulers. Oda Shah da Shah si. He was the king of the kings. He was the true sovereign of this world and the next world. He turned many kings into fakirs. He turned kings into saints. He wasn't a fakir, he was that one who would turn kings into fakirs. And those who were fakirs, those who were already immersed on the spiritual path, he turned them into great peers, he turned them into great mighty saints. But he was not interested in taking that role for himself. And in this way, Guru Nanak Dev Ji, he was the king of kings. That if any king would take to the feet of Guru Nanak Dev Ji, and then that king would become mighty and powerful. And we reflected previously on how Babur took the Raj from Guru Nanak Dev Ji's charan, and how then his son came to the sanctuary of Guru Angad Dev Ji, how then we had a conflict between the Mughal emperors and the house of the Gurus. That this is linked to how the Sikhs took the Raj, because they had a direct conflict with the ruler at the time. And when the Gurus came into conflict with the rulers, the Gurus essentially sought to replace that ruler with one who was more just or kind to their people. And where that couldn't be done, then Guru Gobind Singh Ji gave that rule to their own followers, like the Guru who gives to their own servants. And in this way, Guru Nanak Dev Ji then is described by Bhai Rattan Singh Ji as the true sovereign on this earth, who is the King of Kings and the one whose feet many kings have fallen to and many saints have fallen to too. Those who have fallen to the feet of Guru Nanak Dev Ji have all gained this mighty power and Shakti that you are inquiring of. It is that Shakti then in the form that Guru Gobind Singh Ji, the 10th form of Guru Nanak Dev Ji, came in, that they gave them the spirit via which these small sparrows went on to fight these mighty eagles and the falcons and hawks, and how these Khalsa went on to bring down the mighty Mughal Empire. This is how the peasants overthrew the rulers. This is how the hunted gathered together and threw down the lion. And Bhai Rattan Singh says that Captain Murray, they're inquiring that the Mughals had hundreds of thousands of horsemen, the Mughals had thousands of large cannons, and you're telling me that Guru Nanak Dev Ji was the one who blessed these people to bring down their empire? Is the Pathshahi, or those who sit on empires, those who follow Guru Nanak Dev Ji, they are the Dasis, they are servants, they are Sikhs, they are essentially the peasants who follow religion blindly. They are not these mighty people who know how to rule and bring down empires. That we have never heard of Guru Nanak Dev Ji be spoken of in this way. And Bhai Rattan Singh says, you know nothing of our ways. Let me tell you of one of our mighty ways, that we have this thing in our tradition called the Shihdi Ragda, that when we gather the Nugda of this and throw it at our enemies, this is our spiritual weapon. Now, this is something at this point which it will come further in history, and at those points we will reflect on it. Because there is a great amount of our history we have to understand and first build the maturity to process before we are able to delve into it into depth. And in this essence, before we reflect on what is right or wrong, it is the spirit of those people that we have to accept as a truthful version, because we see that version in the modern day with the Nihang Singhs, and even recently in the events at Delhi and the protests that went on there in our modern history, we saw then those same Nihang Singhs doing their Shihdi Ragde and throwing those Nugde at the throne of Delhi and challenging it and riding through it. Like, those are very powerful visuals even today. So without us understanding our own traditions or our own history or why certain things were done at those times and are maintained as certain traditions within our community, we can look at Bhai Rattan Singh's writings an authentic version of the belief of some of those things at that time. This great powerful weapon consumed by the Nihang Singhs. And now the Nihang Singhs are one who live a life of chaos. The Nihang Singhs are one who live on horseback. The Nihang Singhs are the ones who live forever ready for battle. And in many ways, the Nihang Singhs are one who have seen many battles. When you go into the Nihang Singh camps today, you will find people who many are veterans, many have been in wars, many have been in their own conflicts, and the place is one that is a place of sanctuary for them. And so we find all sorts of practices and behaviours that we may not always find conventional. But within these people and how they live, those who keep alive the traditions of the Guru, there are also many blessings within them as well, those who live that Jivan. And this is why that we sometimes look at these things and immerse us within these things, and we are not then being those swans who are taking the diamonds from within the ocean. We are simply sinking our own minds and our intellect within the ocean. These Guru Sikhs of the time had a Jivan, these Guru Sikhs of the time had firm belief, these Guru Sikhs of the time were immersed within that Sikhi. And really, this is thing of Shihdi Ragda has its place in war, and those who live a life that is sort of orientated in that kind of way, we must then recognize that it is damage that it can bring out with of that environment as well. So these are matters that can be discussed as we go through the Katha, but at this point it is to build an awareness of, we first must open the eyes if we want our eyes, if we want to undo all the lenses that have been placed in front of us over the last 200 years. We must, they say, the open mind works better. that have that intellect to know that these things may be in our history and within some of our traditions today, such as the Nahang Singh, such as at Hajur Sahib, and not in some other places, and that's okay too. But recognizing that, as Guru Gobind Singh Ji has told us in their Bani, that these things come with great risk and great harm, and as we see associated with acts of war that the Khalsa were engaged in the 1700s and onwards.
कबेत बतीस मरीने प्यारे बाच हम से उचारे तब नानक जी पाई जिम शाही कयो सो तब.
And then Captain Murray, then, who in his bond with Bhai Rattan Singh at this point grows to one that Bhai Rattan Singh calls love. And Bhai Rattan Singh Ji says that Captain Murray then at this point became amazed by the religion of Bhai Rattan Singh Bhangu, that he wanted genuinely, Bhai Rattan Singh Ji felt, to know more. And he says to Bhai Rattan Singh, okay, so tell me one thing then, how did Guru Nanak Dev Ji come to be the King of Kings? If Guru Nanak Dev Ji was the true sovereign, then every sovereign is appointed by a sovereign. What was the legal arrangement by which Nanak was made the King of Kings?
And
Bhai Rattan Singh draws our attention here. He says, my Sant, my brothers, because remember, people can be so short-sighted. Someone once said to me, Bhai Rattan Singh Ji's account, we cannot accept it because it was written by the British or for the British. That is not what Sri Guru Panth Parkash is. Sri Guru Panth Parkash is Bhai Rattan Singh Ji, the latter part of their life, returning to the bunga of their granddad, Jathedar Sham Singh Ji, at Amritsar, living a Jeevan dedicated there, saying, I'm going to write this history for the Singhs so that they have it in their record as well. And for that reason, Katha is done of it every day in the Nahang Singh's Dal. And Bhai Rattan Singh Ji says, my Sant Bhai, my Gursikhs, let me share with you this beautiful story that I told to Captain Murray.
Raja kar kahi amor o hai kim bujhe jor ang so lagaye kahi javiye jarur ab.
The true king, Akal Purkh, the one true God, called Guru Nanak Dev Ji, met with Guru Nanak Dev Ji and said to Guru Nanak Dev Ji, your time, your reign has come on earth. You are the true ruler, you are the true sovereign, and all that will take to your path will be liberated.
Nanak kahavo naam bedi kol pavo jaye rakho jo ave sharan dustan kugaro dab.
The Guru Nanak Dev Ji, you will go into this earth, you will be called Nanak, Na meaning not, Nek meaning many. So Guru Nanak Dev Ji's name meaning one. They were the form of that Akal Purkh. Now even in Guru Nanak Dev Ji's avatar, sometimes people in different traditions, even within distinct traditions of Sikhi, because Sikhi is so diverse. Some look upon Guru Nanak Dev Ji as Mahavishnu, some look upon Guru Nanak Dev Ji as Sadashiv, some look upon Guru Nanak Dev Ji as Brahma. If we look at what our Sikh writers tell us of Guru Nanak Dev Ji, forget even our Sikh writers, look at what our Gurus tell us. Guru Granth Sahib Ji's Bani tells us that Aap Narayan Kala Tar Jag Mein Par Bharyo, that Guru Nanak Dev Ji was that one true Lord themselves. Guru Gobind Singh Ji's Bani says, Tin Bediyan ki kul bikhe pragate Nanak Rai, that the true King Guru Nanak Dev Ji took birth within the dynasty of the Bedis, that Bhai Rattan Singh Ji is telling us that Akal Purkh gave that bachan for Guru Nanak Dev Ji to come. Akal Purkh gave that bachan for Guru Nanak Dev Ji to be born within the dynasty of Guru, on the dynasty of the Bedis, which is a very famous dynasty going back to the times of previous yugs that hold great significance even in many of the ancient Indian texts. So in one time when the Sikhs asked Guru Gobind Singh Ji, and this is recorded within Sri Sablo Granth, that who was Guru Nanak Dev Ji, we want to hear it from you. And Sri Guru Gobind Singh Ji says, Sri Guru Nanak Aap Parmeshwar Avatar Liyo Shuddh Bans Pradhana. That yes, what you have heard is true. Sri Guru Nanak Dev Ji was Parmeshwar. They were the primal Lord themselves. And yes, they did take birth in that dynasty because it was a righteous and holy dynasty. So it is not for us again to get caught in these dynastical things, because where Guru Gobind Singh Ji has given us the writings in Bajit Natak, they speak of the battles that these dynasties had within themselves as well. In many ways, very much so, how like the Khalsa Panth as a family has had its battles within itself. So in this way now, Bhai Rattan Singh Ji starts to teach us very valuable lessons with the history that they're saying to the Singhs. I'm talking now directly to you. Murray says, tell me everything now, Bhai Rattan Singh. I want to know your history. How did Guru Nanak Dev Ji's Raj come to spread? And Bhai Rattan Singh Ji says, as I told Captain Murray,
तिमै सुनो तुम संत प्रवीणो
O my Gursikhs, O my saints, O my brothers, listen to this, because the Ityas of Bhai Rattan Singh Ji is only performed in the Panth. It is only performed in the Hazuri of Guru Gobind Singh Ji, and it is performed by those who have recognized that Ityas that is written there is true. And so essentially it is done in satsang as a way of bringing people closer to the Guru, as a way of bringing people closer to Akal Purkh. And Bhai Rattan Singh Ji is now giving us valuable lessons about our history.
कलयुग में बाढ़ पर गयो धुंध
The Kaljug is the time that we are living in now. We are living in dark ages, and at one point these dark ages became so bad
गद्यो को धर्म धर्म पयो मंद
that dharam, righteousness, truth, justice, all these things we speak of, all these things were lost, and there was a great ataram, there was a great injustice in our world, because dharam people think of in terms of religious divisions. It is not something, it is something that is common to everyone. It is your sense of righteousness, your duty towards truth and such and truth. And now this isn't about boundaries. This is in any given situation, whatever religion we are, we should always choose to be dharmi where we can be.
लालच लागे माया भूप
The Dharmis, those who had fallen to the path of greed, of greed for their own land, of accumulating wealth and doing so at the expense of others.
राजन पाए निज धर्म कूप
The Rajas had all lost their own sense of truth, their justice, their duty. All these things were lost by the rulers of the time.
पंथ तारी पेजे जग आए
Time and time again, many new panths were sent into the world. There was sannyasis, adasis. These panths had been going back millennium for hundreds of thousands of years, that had been established, many of them through many yugs previously, in order to spread dharam. And Bhai Rattan Singh Ji speaks about the corruption in religion that was going on at that time.
पंथ बिचल पी तिन कह गए
Their panths essentially have been going as well. So what's different about their panth than your panth?
माया मोहे सबन को छलियो
That Bhai Rattan Singh Ji says that their panth, the outside world, has fallen to Maya. These people who are immersed within greed and corruption and falsehood and have moved away from the path of truthfulness, they have taken to this path of Maya that Guru Nanak Dev Ji saves us from.
धर्म हार निज कुल चह भरियो
Otherwise, if you look to the outside world, if you look out with, you will not find dharam, you will not find truth and justice, and you will not find these things outside. You must find these things within yourself first, and then look to establish those wherever and however you can. But outside the world, if you look at that, you will only find hypocrisy. You will not find truth or dharam.
श्री मुखवाक श्लोक महला पहला काल कार्ती राजे का साई धर्म पंख कर उडरिया
And here, Ihdar Baba Santa Singh Ji Shanmik Rodi, who has done the steek, who has provided the in-depth explanation of this Granth in audio and in written, and is also being translated into English. These writings, Baba Santa Singh Ji refers us to the writings of Guru Nanak Dev Ji themselves, because remember, the whole purpose of coming into satsang, the whole purpose of babaniya, kahaniya, put suput karen, of listening to the tales of your forefathers to be good fathers, the whole purpose of this is to join with the message and the upadesh of Guru Nanak Dev Ji. And Guru Nanak Dev Ji gives us a very truthful picture of the world, where they say that the rulers of this world have become butchers who mercilessly hack at their own peasants, mercilessly hack at their own citizens.
कूड़ अमावस सच चंद्रमा दिसै नाही कह चढ़िया
The moon of truth, that because wherever truth is, truth can be powerful, but that moon that can shine in the darkness, Bhai Rattan Singh Ji says, even that moon had disappeared, so dark were the times. So here Bhai Rattan Singh Ji, in meeting with Captain Murray, tells us of the first conversation, meaningful conversation that he had with Captain Murray. Now, where do we know Bhai Rattan Singh Ji's affiliations? We know Bhai Rattan Singh Ji's affiliations and loyalties because the first thing he tells Captain Murray about is Guru Nanak Dev Ji. We know from here that Bhai Rattan Singh Ji was a Gursikh. And if we think of ourselves and Bhai Rattan Singh Ji knew that if someone is to ask me about me, if someone is to ask me about my people, that story is the story of Guru Nanak Dev Ji. And what happened from this point, as the friendship between Bhai Rattan Singh and Captain Murray grew, as Captain Murray built an interest in understanding and hearing this story and recording it in an authentic way, in a truthful way. Bhai Rattan Singh Ji will continue the Katha in telling us of the Jivan of Guru Nanak Dev Ji, by telling us about the life of Guru Nanak Dev Ji. Now, Bhai Rattan Singh Ji's verses on Guru Nanak Dev Ji are brief, as they are on Guru Gobind Singh Ji, but they are at a minimum history that we should each know. We find detailed narratives in other writings like Surya Parkash, by Kavi Santokh Singh Ji, that expand on the life of Gurus. And the way we think of these two texts are, where Suraj Prakash, the first volume of which is Nanak Prakash, deals extensively with the 10 Gurus. The Panth Prakash deals with our history as the Panth, and that gives that understanding of that. So essentially, in this way, it is a minimum history to know for each person. It is the story of our people. And in this way, Bhai Rattan Singh Ji in the next chapters goes on to tell that story of Guru Nanak Dev Ji's life, Guru Nanak Dev Ji's coming into this earth, and from there Sri Guru Nanak Dev Ji Maharaj's 10th Avatar Guru Gobind Singh Ji, and then the history of the Khalsa Panth will come. So we'll finish here with Samafti by reading the last 2 verses, which is the tradition of Katha performed in the Guru's Darbar. Hanji.
Kal Kati Raje Ka Sari Dharm Pank Kar Udareya Kood Amavas Sach Chandrama Disai Nahi Kah Chadeya Vaheguru Ji Ka Khalsa Vaheguru Ji Ki Fateh.
Jayakare jaave nialo jaave Guru Hargobind Sahib ji nu paave.
Sat Sri Akal.
Vaheguru Ji Ka Khalsa,
Vaheguru Ji Ki Fateh.